Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting.
Marshall, can you please turn on your microphone?
Oh, maybe. Okay, we'll go ahead and call the March 7th, 2024 LOCSD meeting to order. We'll go ahead and have the flag salute. We'll have Chuck lead us off. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Santa Fe has, and what Verona does.
Got to turn my phone off now. Okay, so we have a roll call, please.
Yes, Director Fourcroy,
Here.
Director Sisenia,
I'm here.
Director Gatchel, Vice President Womack,
Present.
President Oholsky.
Present. So with that, then we'll go ahead to agenda item number 2, which is an announcement of our closed session items. The first item A is public employment pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, subsection B1. And then B is discussions about labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code 54957.6.
And we will take public comment before we go to close.
Yes, I know that. All right, so is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a public comment? Seeing none, is there anybody online, Laura?
There is not.
Okay, with that, then we'll go ahead and adjourn to closed session. Okay. So we'll reconvene to open session. We're running a little bit behind, but that's fine. Report out of closed session. I don't believe there was anything to report,
No reportable action.
so we'll pass on that. So that will bring us up to agenda item 6A and 6B, which are the general action items. First one is A, presentation of a standard of cover assessment report regarding fire and I'll start over in a minute here. You ready? Okay, so item 6A, presentation of a standard of covered assessment report regarding fire and emergency services in Los Osos.
Just a really quick introduction here before we move to the presentation, just to refresh everyone's memory and for people that aren't familiar with what we're doing here. Back in early 2023, we began working, moving forward with developing a strategic plan for emergency services. It was suggested by Chief Province that we look at doing a standard of cover study, which I don't know where that's coming from. We heard it earlier. Laura, is there any mics or anything open on your side?
I just muted Sam's. He might need to turn the volume down on his computer.
Okay, that might be it. And so we did go work with ESAC to develop the scope of work, and the board released an RFP in July 2023. And in September, the board approved a contract with Citygate Associates, who is here tonight to help us. And with that, Sam, and I just want to remind you that the recommendation here is to receive and file the report, but also provide some direction to us as we move forward. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen.
Ron, can I ask a question
Yes.
first? Has ESAC seen this committee report or this report?
No,
yet?
they will see it at their upcoming meeting.
Okay.
Ron, can you make sure Sam's microphone is on, please?
Hey, you're all set?
Testing, testing. Everybody here okay?
It's on.
Okay. Well, good evening, board members. Sam Mazza with Citygate Associates. Thank you for the opportunity to present some executive summary comments about our final report on the standards of cover assessment for the Los Osos Community Services District. I like to start our presentations by telling you how the study was conducted. We start by requesting and reviewing significant amount of relevant background documentation and information, both from the district and from CAL FIRE and the fire department staff. We then conducted stakeholder listening interviews with several interested stakeholders, including district and CAL FIRE staff, community advisory council members, and emergency services advisory committee members. We then conducted a comprehensive analysis of incident data over the last 4 fiscal years. And then we presented our research to date, our emerging findings and recommendations to staff in a mid-project briefing. After that, we wrote the draft report. We reviewed that with district staff and submitted the final 83-page final report that you have before you this evening. We also like to remind elected officials and community members that there are no federal, state laws or regulations in the U.S. mandating fire service staffing levels, response performance, or outcomes. However, if fire services are provided, there are numerous state and federal safety regulations that must be followed. And the level of fire service provided is a local policy decision. There's often some constructive tension between community members about the level of service they would like to have and the level of service they can afford. And it may not always be the level that they want. The way that we conduct deployment analysis is sort of a reverse engineering process. We start with outcome goals, and those drive deployment. So the goal of fire service deployment through the standards of cover process is to deliver desired outcomes. And typical urban community level desired outcomes for urban population densities include preventing death and or permanent impairment from a medical emergency where possible, and confining building fires to the room or compartment of origin and rescuing any inhabitants unable to self-evacuate. As opposed to typical rural community outcomes, those are typically preventing death from medical emergencies where possible and confining building fires to the building of origin. Anybody that is not able to self-evacuate will typically perish in those types of communities. And delivering desired outcomes, of course, depends on adequate staffing, apparatus types, and response times. The fire service deployment is essentially about the speed and weight of the response. These are some of the key deployment strategies that we include. Speed refers to that single first due neighborhood-based fire responder to control routine to moderate emergencies for the desired outcome. And weight refers to multiple unit responses needed to control more serious emergencies for the desired outcomes, such as building fires, technical rescues, hazardous materials, spills, and so forth. Specialty units are frequently deployed in addition to or in lieu of engines, ambulances, and ladder trucks to mitigate special hazards, such as hazardous materials, spills or releases, technical rescues, marine incidents, aircraft incidents, and so forth. Some of the comments, highlights of the comments we've received from the stakeholders that we interviewed were that they are very satisfied with fire department personnel and services. We heard nothing negative about department staff or the services provided. All of the stakeholders interviewed consider the staff to be very professional and competent, and none of the stakeholders, I think this is really important, have heard any negative comments from any of the community members that they interact with. So I think that's very positive and something to be very proud of. All of the stakeholders I talked to expect suburban, rural level of service and understand the travel time constraints for mutual aid response. And also a desire to at least maintain the current level of service going forward and the ability to address most emergencies with Station 15 resources and personnel. They understand the aging community demographics, some concern about ambulance response times, although that's not within our scope of study, and ongoing paramedic availability as funded by the fire tax measure. Just mention those because those were comments that we heard. Also concerned about traffic volume and impacts on response times, particularly with weekend traffic, holiday traffic out to the state park. Some concerns about narrow roads and traffic calming measures. Only 2 access egress routes, of course, into and out of Los Osos community. Some neighborhoods have only a single access egress route, and some unimproved roads are either partly or entirely unimproved. Also concerned about the wildfire risk, battalion chief role turnover relative to the district's CAL FIRE contract. Also increasing service demand to the state park and whether or not the district is subsidizing that service. Comments received about the reserve firefighter program and our analysis and fourth seat staffing relative and how that's impacting service levels and overall staffing turnover within the fire department. Our capstone observations from this study include the district, in our opinion, is adequately staffed and deployed to respond to most routine calls for service when 4 personnel are on duty, and that's highlighted for a reason. When 4 personnel are on duty, both units, both the engine and the medic squad are staffed. When only 3 people are on duty, only 1 unit is staffed as we understand it, and that 1 unit goes to all calls. So that leaves no redundant capacity for a simultaneous incident we'll talk about here in a few slides. And that's particularly of concern with EMS calls with 2 paramedics on duty daily. So the bulk of your calls, as you'll see, are EMS related, and having 2 paramedics on duty daily is really significant level of service for a small community like this. In our opinion, residents and businesses cannot reasonably expect positive outcomes for more serious incidents, again, due to the time required to assemble enough personnel from the more distant stations. Talk a little bit about risk assessment. After that, we start with a risk assessment, the values at risk to be protected within the service area. As you're probably aware, the service area in total, the district itself, plus the rural area, about 14,500 people as of 2023, and your daytime population is about 27% less. So significant segment of your population leaves the district during the daytime and then comes back at night. The only data we were able to find relative to projected growth was the district itself. The district population is projected to increase to about 18,600 over the next 11 years or so. Your service area is almost 15 square miles. You have about 6,500 residential housing units, almost 500 businesses with nearly 2,300 employees, 13 critical facilities, and multiple natural resources to protect. Here's a map showing the entire service area with the district boundaries outlined in the heavy black, and you see the population density layer on top of that with the higher population densities within the central portion of the district. And the rural area protected out to the east, they're very low population density, as you're aware. We evaluated 6 hazards for this assessment. We do not replicate or validate the local hazard mitigation plan relative to natural or human-caused hazards. We instead look at hazards relative to the services provided by your fire department. And here we evaluated building fire hazard, vegetation, wildland fire hazard, medical emergencies, hazardous material release or spill, technical rescue, and marine incidents. We start by looking at probability of occurrence. So overall risk is a subject of 2 factors. It's probability of occurrence and impact severity. And in combination, those determine the overall risk for a hazard. So here you see the 5 categories of probability of occurrence. Not important to read all the bullet points there, but they range from rarely occurring to frequently occurring. And again, we look at the past 4 years of incident data that we evaluated, and we assign one of those categories to each of those hazards for the district service area. In terms of impact severity, we also have 5 categories here. I know you can't read all of that. It's just important to understand that there are also 5 categories we assign for impact severity for each of those hazards, from insignificant to extreme. And then in combination, we determine the overall risk by hazard. And you see that listed here on the right column. For building fire, you have a moderate hazard, not frequent in occurrence, moderate in impact severity. Vegetation wildland fire is high, not so much because it occurs frequently, but because of the likely impact severity. Your medical emergency, on the other hand, is high because it occurs almost daily, even though the impact severity is moderate. And your hazardous material risk is moderate, both based on frequency of occurrence and impact severity. Technical rescue is a little higher. You have a few more of those. And the marine incident is moderate overall risk as well. Low level of occurrence, moderate impact severity. Any questions on risk assessment before I go on?
You mentioned 13, I think, critical facilities, you called them. What is that?
Critical facility is something that, were it to be significantly impacted by a hazard, it would have an impact on community services.
Is that like a gas station? I mean,
Not so much a gas station. We think more in terms of
schools?
government services,
Okay.
schools,
Okay.
communications.
So you're not looking at hazards
No,
necessarily,
no,
but
not specifically.
critical services.
Correct. More so that.
Okay.
Public safety, fire, police. Anything else? I think those are categorized in the report as well. Next section we look at is service demand and what that looks like over those 4 years of incident data that we evaluated. We start with overall service demand. You see here for the 4 years we looked at, these were fiscal years starting in July 1 of each year, ending in June 30 the following year. It start with year 1920 and then goes up to report year 22-23. And you see a slight increase there from the first year. Second and third year, pretty similar, and then a slight increase in 22-23. That's all incidents. So not a significant overall increase in service demand, but it is increasing. This shows service demand over that same period by 3 broad incident categories. The blue bars are EMS. You see those consistently increasing each year. The yellow bars are what we call other incident types. And then the very small orangish red bars at the bottom, those are fire incidents. So basically fire, EMS, and other incident categories in this particular chart. This shows service demand over the same 4 years by month and year. And the important thing here that we get out of this is there's no significant seasonal dip or increase in service demand. It's fairly level across all 12 months of the year. You see it varies by year, but overall it's pretty consistent, indicating a consistent need for similar services throughout the year. Same analysis by day of week. We see a pretty level service demand across all days of the week, no significant increase on weekends. So again, no opportunity here to potentially consider reducing service levels on any particular day of the week. This graph shows service demand by time of day. And the interesting thing here to note is there are calls for service all hours of the day. You have midnight on the left, midnight again on the right. Low service demand in the early morning sleeping hours, as is typical of most jurisdictions. And then about 6 a.m., you see the service demand start to rise. And then at about 10 a.m., you see it hits what we call the shoulder, tends to kind of level out through the rest of the day, but you have a long shoulder here, and it doesn't start to really decrease until about 8 p.m. And then it drops off again toward midnight. So a pretty long demand during the day that you'll see here during the next slide. So this, again, is a different way to look at station demand by day and hour. This is for the most recent fiscal year, report year 22-23, and it shows hour from midnight to 1 down to 11 p.m. to midnight on the left, and then across by day of the week. And you see it's pretty consistent by day of week. And the hour again matches up with what I said earlier in the last slide, starts to climb about 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning and doesn't start to drop off again until about 8 p.m. This slide shows what we call unit hour utilization. And what this means is the percentage shown in each of these cells are the percentage of that hour over a 365 days, that report year 22-23, that there was an active incident open within the district service area. So you see Medic Squad 15 there at midnight. There's 6.92% of the time over those 365 days of the year that there was an incident that squad was committed to, and 4.9% of the time the engine was committed as well. Now, why is that important? Well, you look at the different colors here, and these don't pay any attention to the color because these are automatically generated by Microsoft Excel. But what we do look at is there's a point at which service demand and working of a crew, whether it's a squad or the engine, can become saturated, and they're just going from call to call to call, not getting any break for bathroom breaks, meal breaks, just rest break, time to clean up, replenish the engine or the squad. And it's just what we would consider inhumane. This all originated within the ambulance industry. They were looking for optimum unit hour utilization to maximize profit, but still not overwork their crews. So we've kind of stolen that from the ambulance industry. And in our perspective, a UHU in excess of 30% over many consecutive hours is what we would consider saturation, and where we would recommend that the jurisdiction start to look at some way to relieve that crew for a few hours and give them some kind of a break. As you can see here, you're nowhere close to 30%. So we would say that none of your units are close to saturation anytime soon. In terms of simultaneous incident activity, as you see here on the top, 13.22% of the time when one incident is active, there's another incident starting sometime while that incident is still open. That's a pretty significant number for a small jurisdiction like this. And you see down there in the bottom graph, by year, 1920 is low, kind of climbed in 2021, and then it's kind of leveled off the last 2 years. But I think this is an important thing to consider when we get to the overall findings and recommendations, that 13% of the time you have more than one incident occurring simultaneously. In terms of mutual aid activity, whether it's automatic or mutual aid, you see here that you're providing mutual aid to other jurisdictions about 3 times as often as you're receiving it. I do have reason to believe, though, in talking with Chief Province and other staff, that the data provided here, this is straight out of fire reports that are submitted to the state. It's a separate field in the incident report, whether auto aid or mutual aid was provided or not. We have reason to believe these may not be completely accurate. And in fact, the aid provided to other jurisdictions may be higher than what is shown here. But again, that's what was shown in the data that we received to evaluate.
Is that something that you're gonna reconcile and fix in the report, or are you gonna just leave it like this?
This is all the data that we have. I
Okay.
think you can request staff to maybe investigate it through CAL FIRE records. Maybe
Did Citygate, so how did you get the data? Did you request data from CAL FIRE from Chief Province, or how
Correct.
did that work?
So we request all of the NFIRS, the National Fire Incident Reporting System data that is submitted to the State Fire Marshal, that's then submitted to the federal government. That includes all the data in those fire reports. And that's what we analyze for the incident data and all the statistics that you're hearing here today.
Okay, so it came from a state database.
Came from the local unit initially.
Oh,
So they submit it to the State Fire Marshal.
Sure.
State Fire Marshal submits it to FEMA.
okay, but you guys got the data from FEMA, from the
From
State
CAL
Fire
FIRE,
Marshal?
from
Okay,
CAL
from
FIRE.
CAL FIRE.
So I think if there's some error here, it's most likely a training issue more than anything else, with staff maybe not fully, and I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth, maybe not understanding where the jurisdictional responsibilities are within the district and the service area versus aid outside that map line. That's easy, happens quite easily. We run into this quite frequently with clients. It's not something that gets paid a lot of attention to in the report process.
Okay, well, yeah, it's just important to make sure that we're we're getting the whole picture, that's all.
Mhm.
Does that seem about right to you, Chief Province?
Yeah, so essentially, that data is based off the fire reports that they generate. So if they don't select aid was given or aid was received for the call, it's not gonna tabulate in that data. In our CAD, as we dispatch and the reports that we give you monthly, that's done straight out of the CAD system. And when that incident is generated, that is a different database than what this database is. This one's actually generated by the officer, the engine officer making the report. So like I said, the training issue of helping them understand that they need to select that, and it is not uncommon that that box gets skipped over and ignored. So kind of the garbage in, garbage out, we put garbage in, so we got garbage statistic. It just didn't produce accurately.
Because you give us these because Ron asked you for them and it did seem like in the reports we get from you, it's more even. So we don't have to be as alarmed that it's more house. Okay, thank you. That's
Yeah,
what I want to
that was
hear.
something that we discussed in this meeting. We're trying to figure out how to get more accurate representation of that for you, but unfortunately, the way that the systems work, they're completely separate systems. What I give you out of the report that we give you monthly is completely separate from the staff production.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions on incident data, incident statistics before I move on to response performance? So the next section of the report deals with response performance. And here we look at two key things. Fires within an occupied dwelling unit will reach what we call flash point, where all the gases in the room combust at the same time, and survival in that environment is impossible. That typically can occur in anywhere from 5 to 8.5 minutes or so. And coincidentally, cardiac arrest, if it's not resuscitated and interventions made within about the first 7.5 minutes, you've got permanent brain damage. So this is what we look at in terms of speed of response, getting that first unit with the appropriate personnel, appropriate tools, appropriate training to that patient or that building fire within that first 7.5 minutes or so, if you want those urban level outcomes. Here again is a map of the district showing station location relative to the district boundary and the unincorporated area to the east. Help you understand the travel times there. I want to
Does
spend a few
this-
minutes on this particular chart. There's a
Excuse
lot
me-
of information
Excuse me real
here.
quick. Back to that map. Some of these response times, do they include Montana de Oro, also the state park?
No, we only look at response times
in the
within
boundary.
the service area.
Okay, thank
We
you.
consider Montana de Oro to be mutual aid for the
It should
purposes
be.
of this study. That is an aid agreement, in our opinion, between the district and county fire. The district, in our opinion, has no statutory requirement to provide fire services to the state park. So that's how we looked at it for the purpose of this study.
Okay, thank you for that.
So in this chart on the left column there, you see the different components that we look at for response performance. And it starts with call processing dispatch. This is the time interval from receipt of the 911 call in the fire dispatch center until completion of the dispatch sequence. Best practice for that, according to the National Fire Protection Association, is 1 minute, 90% of the time. Citygate's best practice recommendation is 1.5 minutes, 90% of the time. District's 90th percentile performance over the 4 years we looked at is 1 minute, 4 seconds. So that's really, really good performance. It's 4 seconds slower than the NFPA best practice and 26 seconds faster than Citygate's best practice recommendation. So, and you see it shaded green there, referencing and referring to this is a very good level of performance. The next component is what we call crew turnout, and this is the time interval from the end of the dispatch sequence to the start of apparatus movement toward the incident. It includes understanding the dispatch, donning the appropriate safety clothing, understanding the route of travel, boarding the apparatus, buckling the seatbelt, starting the apparatus, and starting movement. Best practice for that from NFPA is 1 minute to 1 minute 20, depending on the incident type. We have long recommended 2 minutes as a best practice for crew turnout over a 24-hour day. And very few agencies in our many, many years of experience are able to meet the minute 20 crew turnout standard. You see the 90th percentile performance for the district over the 4 years, 2 minutes, 6 seconds. We consider that to be very good performance. Then the next component is what we call first unit travel. This is the actual driving time for that first unit from wherever it's located to the incident. Best practice time for that to achieve urban level outcomes is 4 minutes. That's both NFPA and Citygate. And your current 90th percentile performance, again, 90% of all fire and EMS calls. This performance data only looks at fire and EMS incidents, not the other types, the most urgent types of calls, is 6 minutes of 4 seconds. And obviously that has to do with the size of the service area, the road network, traffic calming, all of those other factors that I mentioned in the stakeholder comments. And
So-
that's 2 minutes and 4 seconds slower than best practice for urban level outcomes.
So you're comparing us to more dense populations where they don't have to travel as far?
We're just saying, if you want to look at urban level best practice outcomes, if you add up the 1.5 minutes for call processing dispatch, 2 minutes for crew turnout, that leaves 4 minutes for travel to get that first unit there in 7.5 minutes.
What is urban? What does that mean?
So we're talking about population densities primarily.
Okay.
So higher population densities, typically 1,500 or more people per square mile, depending on which source you want to look at, is considered urban density.
Okay, so you're comparing us to other urban densities.
It's not a comparison. It's just,
Well, the standard is, you're talking about an urban level of service, but we're more
you're
spread out.
That's correct.
We're not that urban. I mean,
I understand it.
So
We'll get to that
that's-
when we get to the recommendations. I just wanted to share with you, compared to best practice for best outcomes, this is what the performance looks like over
but
the last.
because of the type of community we are, it
Mhm.
may not be achievable.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Absolutely correct. So then the next line is first unit call to arrival. And this is not just adding up those first 3 columns, because it's a different pot of data when you throw out the variables and the ones that are non-conforming or zero, or what we call outliers. So best practice recommendation from NFPA is, again, for best outcomes, 6 minutes for that first unit from call to arrival. At Citygate, as I mentioned earlier, we look at a 7.5 minute best practice goal. And your 90th percentile performance for fire EMS calls is 8 minutes, 23 seconds. So just, a minute or so longer than our best practice recommendation. That's really not bad, given the size of the district and the road network. Then when we look at what we call effective response force, or the multiple unit response to more serious incidents, travel time, best practice recommendation, again, for positive outcomes, best outcomes is 8 minutes for the last unit to arrive. And your last unit's arriving 90% of the time, 15 minutes and 46 seconds. Again, that's strictly due to just the travel distance for those last units. on those-
Is that, so that's basically an incident big enough that we need mutual aid
Correct.
coming in from Morro Bay, San
Morro
Luis
Bay
County?
somewhere, correct.
So, yeah.
And I think it's important to note here, and we'll note it later as well, those incidents are few and far between within your district. They're pretty rare. So then when we looked at what we call effective response force call to arrival for those more serious incidents, again, if I'm remembering correctly, there were only, I think, 2 incidents over the 4-year period. It was 18 minutes and 44 seconds from call to arrival of that last unit. But again, couple incidents over 4 years. So that's why you see those shaded red, those exceed what we would consider reasonable response times to achieve desired outcomes. But it's just not possible given your topography, your geography, and the location of your mutual and auto aid resources.
Yeah, the end of our district area does not abut someone else's.
Right.
So they have to travel a
Yeah.
greater distance.
Our favorite term for that is you're at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, but we like that.
I know.
That's what we
It
like
has its
about our
positives.
community. Not so good for your
Not so good for some things, yes.
for big emergencies.
All right. So this histogram shows that a little bit differently. This is for fire and EMS incidents, minute by minute. Over just the last year, you see a good portion of them. Arrival travel time is 4 minutes or less. A larger chunk of them, 5 minutes or less. And I would say most of them within 6 minutes or less. But then you see that long tail out there. There's still some probably out in the very rural areas of the service area, or the engine or the squad were not in quarters when that call was originated, whatever caused that travel time to be longer. But I think you can see here, you're getting to a very large percentage of them within that 6th minute. So I'll move on to our findings. We think your station location and daily staffing are adequate for routine calls for service when 4 personnel are on duty. And again, I just want to highlight that when the 4 personnel are on duty, there's significant challenges we've been told with keeping that 4th seat staffed with a reserve firefighter. And again, when only 3 people are on duty, it's my understanding, our understanding, that all 3 respond on a single apparatus, and that leaves no reserve capacity for a simultaneous call for service.
And I know we're gonna get into it, but might as well. One of the things I wanted to ask, maybe Chief Province, maybe you could walk us through, because you've done that for me in the past where you have, I think it's a fire, you have 1 unit can come, and if you have the second, they can get in the building. Can you maybe go through that real quick for us, like why that's important?
Yeah, so essentially. So essentially, the situation you're talking about is when we have an immediate danger to life hazard environment. And so we have to have what's called, by OSHA regulation, we have to have what's called 2 in, 2 out. So if there's 2 people in, we have to have 2 people outside in case they get into trouble. We got somebody that can back them up and pull them out. So what's important is when we pull up to a structure fire, would be our best example, is when we get to that structure fire, unless there's a perceived rescue or a known rescue, unless I have 4 personnel at that scene to have my 2 in, 2 out, my guys cannot enter the building. They have to wait. So they will have to either engage in firefighting operations from outside, or they'll have to wait until that additional unit gets there in order to have that 2 in, 2 out in order to enter that building. There may not be a confirmed rescue, and so it's up to that engine officer's decision-making process and the evidence that he sees in front of him to make that decision as to whether they're going to enter and violate that policy, because we do have exemptions from it if we think there's a rescue inside. So some of the things that we take into account is time of day, what day of the week it is, if there's cars in the driveway, if there's just evidence that somebody is there and not everybody's accounted for. So that is the instance that we would grab onto the exemption and make that entry. But your expectation as a community from your fire department, that's kind of where some of this conversation started, is what's your expectations of us as your fire department? What do you want us to do when there's a building on fire? Do you want us to keep it in that building of origin, the block of origin, the room of origin? Do you want us to engage in aggressive interior operations and to make those grabs and pull people out? And so having those 4 bodies on duty all the time is really, really important in order for us to be able to effectively do that.
Yeah, thank you. That's the exact part that I can't put into words, but that is, you really start to understand how you guys have to operate and why that seat's important.
Yep.
And I think for a lot of us in the community, we think that we have the crew and we have the engine, so we have 4 people all the time, but we'll see what that looks
Sure.
like here.
And it's not just fires. It's also confined space rescue. It's also hazardous materials incidents.
Mhm.
Anything where there's an opportunity that if we don't have the protections that we have, that,
Sure.
there could be great bodily injury or death, those provisions apply.
Yeah, and then to wait for that next person, you're waiting that whatever it was, 14 minutes or whatever on average to get here.
Yep. So we're looking at either Morro Bay, the Cal Fire Station off of Santa Rosa and Foothill,
Mhm.
or San Luis City.
Okay, thank you.
So moving on, your first unit travel performance is slower than recommended best practice, again, due to your 15 square mile service area, the road network design and maintenance of those roads, some of those roads, traffic calming measures in some neighborhoods, and limited access to some neighborhoods. In addition, your effective response force, multiple unit travel, and call to arrival performance is also slower than recommended due to travel distance, again, for those mutual aid resources, something that just can't be avoided. We find your service demand increased 16.7% over the 4 years. So that's not a significant increase, but it is increasing some each year. Over that same time period, medical emergencies increased 11.5%. And with your aging demographics, we expect your service demand likely to impact to increase, particularly for those medical emergencies. We understand the district is challenged to maintain that 4-person daily staffing with reserve firefighters, and that does in fact have an impact on availability, as I mentioned, for simultaneous incidents. We also find that state park service demand is increasingly impacting availability, service availability within the district and the adjoining rural service area. And we suggest that you adopt the following recommended response time goals. 1 minute for call processing and dispatch, 2 minutes for crew turnout, 5 minutes for first unit travel. That gives you 8 minutes for that call to first unit arrival, 12 minutes for effective response force travel, and 15 minutes for your effective response force call to arrival, all at 90% reliability. And we think, given the analysis that we've done, that those are achievable performance goals. We're not giving you or recommending something that we don't think you can achieve. We further recommend that the district consider adding a 4th paid person per shift if you're unable to maintain 4th seat daily staffing with reserve firefighters, or in the alternative, budget additional overtime to maintain that 4-person staffing with full-time CAL FIRE personnel. And the purpose of this is to ensure that both response resources are staffed 24/7, 365. We would also suggest that the district at least consider increasing minimum daily response staffing over time to 6 personnel to improve the potential for positive outcomes to more severe incidents. If this is something that the district wants to consider, then we would suggest that you consider looking for opportunities to fund a couple more personnel daily over time.
Are these recommendations based on calls for service now, or are you also looking at the future? There's slight growth projected.
Correct. So we look at,
and we're increasing service calls yearly. So
it's both. So it's looking at the analysis we did, the 4 years of incident data that we looked at for this study, and also looking at what we think the growth line is for service demand.
So the 6 is to account for that growth.
Some of that. And again, it more to account for the opportunity to have better outcomes for those more serious incidents that occur less frequently without having to necessarily wait for that next auto or mutual aid apparatus to arrive from Morro Bay or San Luis City or CAL FIRE.
Okay, so really that recommendation is to handle this level of call volume right now.
And the increase, correct. Again, it's not just that we would like to see the board have a conversation about it.
Yeah, well, and we have been, and this is why
Okay.
we did this study. I think part of that revolves around, where are we at right now, and what does that look like in the future?
Remember the first slide I showed you, no regulations relative to staffing, service level, or outcomes. It's a conversation within the community. What would the community like to have in terms of outcomes, and what can it afford to pay for?
Well, and that was also on your slide, was one of the community comments that to the desire to maintain our level of service,
Correct.
because that's an important piece of what we have in Los Osos. So
Absolutely.
to maintain that, I think
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking at, is how do we maintain that now? If it's degraded over time, and then how do we maintain that going forward in the future? So that's where my questions are going to be coming
Okay.
from.
Very good.
If I could just interject, I think what we're looking at is that 4th person as the first step.
Yeah.
That's to really make sure we have what we have or have desired right now. And that adding that extra person is a future, outcome to get to, the outcomes that we desire as a community.
Right. So over time and looking at a growing community.
The final recommendation we have is to update your automatic mutual aid agreements with your partner agencies around you to include the city of San Luis Obispo. As we understand it, there is not currently a formal aid agreement with the city, and next to Morro Bay, they would, in our opinion, be the next closest resource. So I think after talking with staff, all of the mutual aid agreements probably need review and update in the near future. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to address any questions.
Does anybody on the board have any additional questions?
Oh, I don't know if I can get an answer, and it might be from Ron. Like, why are we not able to, why is the reserve? Do we know why that's not working? Is it pay or is it something else?
Chief
I
Province.
think
probably-
Chief
I
can
can
speak to that.
I can
Okay.
partially answer that
Right.
for you. We have done studies in many states over the past several years, and you are not alone in having significant challenges to maintain staffing with reserve, volunteer, paid call, whatever you want to call a non-full-time firefighter. Volunteerism in the United States has been on a significant decline for the last decade and a half. Less interest in volunteerism, dual income families, desire to have their time away with family to do other things. Across the United States, we've seen a significant decrease in volunteerism, particularly in the fire service. And that goes all the way to the West Coast, where we have some departments such as this that utilize reserve or paid call firefighters to help augment staffing, the daily full-time staffing. So that's part of the question, part of the answer to you. It's not unique here, it's everywhere.
I'm just wondering what might be more cost effective is beefing up reserves.
Well, wait, let Chief.
I can also tell you that typically in most of our client agencies that have reserve firefighters, they're typically younger people, typically mostly male, looking to get a career in the fire service.
Right.
So this is one way that they get that experience on the resume. Many, if not most of them, are working as a seasonal firefighter for another agency, and they do this during that non-fire season time to keep their foot in the door for that career job someday.
Thank you. Chief,
Wanna,
that was what I wanted you to say, but he's already said it for you, so.
Yeah.
well, you can tell us from the perspective of our district.
Well, like you said, it's an industry-wide issue. And San Luis Obispo County and Los Osos are definitely subject to that as well. What we've seen with the demographic is that we're definitely getting those younger folks that are stepping into the career for the first time. They're putting their toe in the pool, and then they get that job, they get that full-time job, and then their ability to fully commit to us and be able to come out and work with us decreases to the level where they're not able to meet their minimums anymore of coming to the drills and meeting their 24-hour shifts a month. And so they either attrition out on their own, or we ask them to kindly leave because they become a liability. They're not trained anymore. And so one statistic I can give you, I was going to bring it up later, but so last year we started with 17 personnel on the reserve firefighters. We separated 9. We had 2 that were out on injury all year. One of those has separated since, and we hired 7 during that period of time. So we're not keeping up with what we're losing. The training requirements now are so much greater than even when I started as a paid call firefighter for the county in 1996, which I essentially went to 4 or 5 weekends out at Camp San Luis, got my training, had my basic EMS qualifications, CPR and public safety first aid, and I got a pager and a set of turnouts and started going to calls. Now we're engaging in full-blown fire academies. We are requiring EMT. You also have hazardous materials training that you have to upkeep. You have Diablo training that you have to upkeep. You have all the rescue training that you have to upkeep, and those are also have to be upkept on an annual and monthly basis in order to make sure that when they do get on the engine with us and are operating in the capacity that we're asking them to operate in, which is, you know, the fourth person on our 2 in, 2 out, we want to make sure that they are properly equipped and trained in order to be safe and go home to their families. And so part-time firefighting, when you want to be an aggressive fire department, is kind of it's a challenging thing to maintain. And so, and the reality is the industry as a whole is seeing a decline in applicants. All public safety is seeing a decline in applicants. There's other ways to make money now that allow you to stay home all day or travel the world and do different things, where public safety isn't necessarily the hot commodity job that it used to be.
Chief, could you touch on some of the costs that we incur for the reserve program?
So annually you're budgeted for about $300,000. I don't have the figures out in front of me right
Yeah.
now, but when we bring them on, right now we do not send them to an academy. We are now requiring them to come to us with a state fire marshal accredited firefighter 1 academy certificate. So that takes a lot of the budgetary constraints off of us and the financial constraints off of us. We're requiring them to come to us with EMT, so we're not having to put budgeted money into training them for their EMS certificates. But they do come in. And so when we do hold an academy, an in-house academy, the last one we had was roughly 4 weekends, which we had to pay overtime to staff. And so you're looking at about $10,000 to put on that academy just in staff hours. And, you know, that's depending on if it gets interrupted or whatnot. It may have to get extended. We're paying for those folks. They start out at minimum wage, so we're paying their hourly wage while they're doing that. We also have to send them to get a physical done at the cost. I believe it's about $400 to get that physical completed. So there's a lot of different costs that goes into them, and then training them over the year.
Yeah.
There's a lot of costs that doesn't get factored into that line item budget, but you have to think of personnel hours that go into inventorying their gear, issuing their gear, maintaining their gear. A set of turnouts runs about $1,500 for the jacket and another $1,500 for the pants, about $500 for the helmet, and then about another $300 for the boots. And that's just for the structural firefighting ensemble. That's not including their wildland ensemble.
So that's like, so there's like a budgeted cost, and then there's also kind of not hidden costs, but costs that's being covered by other budget line
Yes.
items
Yes.
that's going into this program.
Yep.
So we're spending a significant amount of time and energy and money on it.
Correct. And then I would also say that the county fire department is also doing a similar, or they're doing a study right now on their paid call firefighter program, which we actually introduced some of our information to. And so when that study comes back, I'll be sharing that information with you guys as well. But they're suffering the same challenges. Roughly about 250 rostered spots and roughly 12 active members of the 250 rostered spots. So it's a significant issue throughout the industry. So.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for explaining.
I have wanted to clarify a couple quick things. We touched on state parks and MDO. How significant are the levels of, or the amounts of calls that we're responding to out there?
I would say the type of incidents that we get out there, because they're labor intensive, because typically they're not in an easy location. They're not in a house. They're typically out on a trail. They might be down on a beach, off a cliff. They might be out in the water. So it's the time that we're spending on those calls that's probably the more significant draw on those calls. The frequency, as more people go to that park, and the statistic I saw on KSBY recently was that there were 700,000 vehicles that went in and out of the park last year. And so, you know, if you just figure 2 people per car, that's 1.4 million people going in and out of that park. That's a pretty significant population bump that's traveling through the district.
Oh yeah.
Which is an increased workload on all your services. It's, you know, increased workload on your roads. It's increased workload on your fire department, on the sheriff's office, on CHP.
Yeah.
There's a lot of increase in services, but there's also revenue that comes in, right? You know, where they're going to the gas stations. The district doesn't collect funds that way, but they are coming in and spending their money and supporting your businesses.
Yeah.
So there's a perk on that side of things. But I will say that the the types of calls that we run out there, the rescues, and even just a basic medical aid is typically not just a basic medical aid. It's usually what we call a remote area rescue, where we're having to bring multiple units in order to deal with that, because we're either having to bring a helicopter in
Mhm.
or we're having to hike them out, which is a pretty labor intensive operation.
So you guys treat that as mutual aid, basically, like the apparatus will go up there and then it should be getting backfilled essentially.
So currently what happens is when we dispatch to a call there, we activate both units out of station 15 and a cover engine is started behind. What was happening is one unit would remain behind and other fire engines would drive by, and then we would end up having our fire engine committed out there for longer periods of time. The concept being, if we can go there and mitigate the incident quickly and get back in service sooner, then we're going to take that rather than wait for that unit that's coming from 15, 20 minutes away to get out there and help us to mitigate. The other direction is that the officers, when they get out there, if they recognize that the call only requires one of those pieces of equipment, the second is immediately released and sent back to the district so that it's available for district response. Now, when we're in those days that we don't have 4 people, the company is rolling as a 2-piece company. There's 2 on the engine, 1 on the squad, and they go everywhere together. So in those instances, both units are remaining there, and you're getting that cover apparatus coming in and sitting at the station.
Okay, so that's another spot that we could improve with staffing.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
They'll stay close by.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, we'll go to public comment. If you're in the audience, and you'd like to make a public comment, please step up to the podium. State your name for the records, please.
Sure.
Richard Margetson. 19 years ago, we defeated the first fire tax group of us. And then we got yes on AO5 passed by over 87% of the community. But what we sold, I don't know if sold's the right word, the community on was the big improvement was simultaneous response. And we've been touting that. I've been touting that for years. I'm really concerned now that we're not at that level of service with simultaneous response. And during that whole process, I asked Phil Veneris one time, what's the major impact of simultaneous response? And he said, I'll just be blunt. It saves lives. We have to get back to that. Somehow we have to get back to that. I'm disappointed that the reserve fire situation is the way it is. I understand it, but I wish I put a plea out. I wish more of the finance committee had been here. I take it this presentation is only going to be here. Is that correct? Okay. Only going to be here. I think we have to have start that serious conversation of how we're going to get back to where we were. We still have an exceptional level of service compared to the unincorporated area of the rest of the county. But what we originally made the change for was, the big thing was the simultaneous response with paramedics. And if that's not happening now, the community's got to be informed of that and, find out what the response is to paying for that increase. And as I stated at the finance committee the other night, the original fire tax that got defeated was $125 a year. 18 years later, we're not even at that point now after 18 years. So we've gotten a lot for our funding from our funding source all these years, but we have to get back to simultaneous response. And then just, could you pull this chart up?
I can,
Yeah. Can I just have time for him to, I just have a question on this.
Go ahead. Get it to get back here.
Sam is disconnected from the Zoom meeting. Ron, are you able to bring the presentation up?
It'd be faster if you did.
This chart?
We'll keep going. It's toward the end. It's the response performance.
There. There. Okay, just an observation under the crew turnout line item or category or whatever, the performance versus best practice. I think it should be 46 seconds to a minute, 6 seconds, not 26 seconds to 106. I know that's only a 20-second difference, but this is going to be seen now by a lot of people. And I think it's got to be as accurate as possible. I'm real curious to see what the timeline is for emergency services, seeing this for finance, getting to see where we are and the understanding about where we are with simultaneous costs, because we're doing great on, being able to fund our vehicles, all that stuff. But, you've heard me for years talk about simultaneous response, and I'm real concerned that we're not there right now.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment in the room? Okay, no other public comment in the room. Laura, do we have anybody online?
We do. If anybody would like to make a public comment and you are online, please raise your hand. There's no public comment online.
Okay, we'll bring it back. Ron, would you like to proceed first?
Yes. We
Since the
will be,
question was to you.
we will be discussing the document at our Emergency Service Advisory Committee coming up. I forget, it's
The 13th.
Thank you. We won't have a full presentation by our consultant, but I will do my best to provide the information as it's been presented. The financial considerations, we probably won't do a full presentation to the Finance Committee, but once the board and ESAC make some recommendations, that'll have financial implications. We'll have full discussion in terms of where those recommendations have come from.
Sam, do you have any responses?
I was just looking at my calendar and I can be available online if
Yeah,
you'd like.
I wasn't going to put you on the spot.
I can be available by Zoom if that
Yes,
would work for
we
you.
could do that.
It-
Okay, thank
It's
you.
actually on the 14th, not the
Oh, I'm sorry, I
13th,
had the wrong-
Thursday.
That works as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Wait, yeah, I had realized that same thing. So,
That's interesting, and I apologize for that. At least 4 people review and proof every document that goes out to a client.
no, I
can't
spent
believe
minutes.
they don't
try-
have a
4 of
Richard,
us
though.
missed that.
They don't have
I
a Richard.
I spent minutes trying to figure out how that calculation worked out, as Laura could testify to. Okay, so we'll close public comment then and bring it back to the board. Chuck, you want to go first? Or you
I
don't
just
have
want
to?
a clarification. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. I started hearing simultaneous response all of a sudden. I hadn't heard that term until the last speaker. We heard 4-person staffing, and we're talking the same thing, making sure we have 4 people in the station all the time. That is the same with simultaneous response. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I don't want to speak for the gentleman, but when we refer to simultaneous response, we're talking about simultaneous incidents, not simultaneous response by specific units.
What does that have with staffing? I want to get to staffing. Not,
It depends on how the district chooses to deploy the 2 apparatus that are staffed. If they both go to all calls, then you still don't have capacity for that simultaneous incident until a cover unit arrives within the district. However, if both units don't go to all calls, then those times where they don't, you have redundant capacity for a simultaneous incident.
We'll have our fire people to respond to that.
So the way your department is built, originally your intention was to have have the ability to have 2 paramedics on every call. And then if you had an additional call, I'll have another piece of an equipment that can respond to that call. What we've done in order to kind of deal with our staffing shortage with reserves, and when we only, those days that we only have 3 people on duty, we're still meeting the simultaneous call responses. We're just challenged when we're down to when we're down a body. And the way that we deal with that call is when they get to the scene, and now with San Luis Ambulance staffing an ambulance in Los Osos, which we were able to get done this year, get them to do that. And now they're talking about going to a 24-hour car, which is another upgrade. But the way that we're able to overcome that challenge is if the call has stabilized enough that if there's another call, the engine will become available to take the next call from the scene. And the squad will remain behind with the ambulance company if the ambulance is at scene. So we're still able to do it. There's a finite amount of time that we're not going to be able to meet that requirement, in which we have the cover engine coming, but from where's it coming from could dictate how long it takes it to get here. And it's probably not going to have a paramedic on it because it's going to be a county fire engine and it's going to be an EMT basic life support engine company. So it'll be a different service than what you're used to have or than what you have here. However, somebody will be coming. But the way that we've kind of bridged that gap right now and addressed the issue is that the captains have been given the discretion that when they're on a call and another call populates, if the call is stabilized, they will leave one apparatus behind, typically the squad, because that's where the reserve firefighter typically staffs. So if they're not there, then it's just one paramedic on the squad by himself. He will remain at the scene and the engine will take the new call. So hopefully that kind of answers that a little bit. It's just trying to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah. So it's pretty obvious to me that we really need 4 bodies all the time
to meet what you guys are looking to do. And that's kind of the whole exercise that we're going through. That's part of it is understanding where the holes in our service are and what we can do to make it better. And, just moving forward, what the threshold of the community is and what direction you guys want to go. And we've already identified some low hanging fruit within this, the auto aid agreements, that's low hanging fruit that we can take care of. Some of the response things, we've already talked with the staff about how we can make that a little bit better and maybe where some of those numbers were challenged just because technology wasn't so good. And now the technology has gotten better. And so maybe we'll be getting, more accurate statistics that show those numbers coming up in the positive. So there's a lot of different things that we can do that we see as low hanging fruit. At the end of the day, the heavy lift is going to be, what do you want to do about staffing and where you want to go with it and how we're going to make it happen.
Right.
So
That was the whole purpose of having this report done, so we
Yep.
could find out that information.
Well, it provides a lot of recommendations, which are great. So I guess
That's it.
the next part is how do we
Not when he's talking.
we passing notes? How do we move forward and get to those decision points? I mean, I know this is going to go to ESAC. Is that basically it kind of goes to committees, or are we going to be? Because I know this is going to generate this plus the condition assessment at the station are going to. The purpose is to put together a strategic plan
Correct.
into the future. Right?
And this will give us another piece of that puzzle to assign cost to, because we know between what we need to do to Station 15 plus any considerations for increased staffing or other costs, we need to put that in a clear, concise, document so we can see where our revenue and our expenses are going to cross. And that's when we'll need to go to the public for added support.
Right.
And one thing I'd like to point out in the recommendations that they're giving, when they report the desired times that we're looking at, and there's the NFPA number and the city gate number, Phoenix Fire Department is going through some similar challenges right now. And they just did a big report, and I don't have their numbers, but they were talking in order to meet the NFPA numbers. And what you have to understand about NFPA numbers, those are pie in the sky. That's like the best, everything's the greatest. There's a fire station every 10 blocks, which, I mean, if you can afford it, great, but most places can't. And so meeting those numbers the statistic that the chief threw out for Phoenix Fire Department is they were going to have to add 12 fire stations to meet NFPA numbers. And you imagine 12 fire stations and their staffing levels, they run 4 people on an engine. And it's probably $5 to $6 million a station on an annual budget. So the city gate numbers, while they may seem like it's a lower standard, it's an achievable standard. And so like he was saying, that we can, these are all attainable things, the 90%, these are attainable things. And so looking at those numbers, we're not lessening our service. We're putting things into a realistic box and going after a realistic goal. And, I just want people to understand the difference between the NFPA number and that city gate number. It's a pretty big gap when we go down the road. And, some places, if you go down to LA City, you'll see Class 1 fire department on the side of their engines. They've got huge tax bases. They have millions of people to draw from. They've got a fire station almost every 10 blocks. We're out here, we wouldn't put it on our door, but we're essentially a Class 9 department because of our staffing and the amount of apparatus we have and our water capacity and all that. We don't have the resources. We don't have the revenues that they do. So we just have to do the best with what we have. And so we're trying to look how to extend the bang for your buck and give you the best possible service we can.
Excellent. Anybody else?
It's hard enough to get by with volunteers at dog parks and libraries and food banks.
We've had that going on for a number of years.
Yeah, we need to address that.
Where people would start training here and then move down to LA where they could make a ton of money. So that's nothing new. So
Well, I want to put out a thank you, Mr. Munns, Chief Province, thank you to Citygate, that this is something we've had in the works for a while and we delivered on it. So I really appreciate it. I know that it was probably a lot of work, a lot of questions to be answered, but
It was a great process.
Yeah,
And do want to
it's
thank Citygate. They did a great job. And we'll be talking a lot more about this. This was kind of the introduction. I think you got the flavor of what's going on. And so we'll just continue down through the recommendations and how we can come out at the end with a strategic plan for emergency services.
well, with that, I'll move that we receive and file the report and the
And we-
provided direction to.
we've
staff.
already provided direction, I think. Yeah. So based on the conversation, we provided direction. So we have a motion to receive and file. There's,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? No. Okay, so thank you very much for your attendance and we appreciate it. So what I'd like to do is, we've been in session for 2 hours, but I'd like to take 6B and 7, and then before we go to the administrative committee reports, we'll take a short break if that's okay with everybody. Okay, so let's go to 6B now. 6B is conceptual approval of entering into an agreement with S&T Mutual Water Company for emergency water system response services and routine maintenance. Ron, take it away.
Thank you very much. This is a fairly brief presentation. Just a little bit of background about our relationship with S&T Mutual Water Company in the district. Back in December 22, the board approved pursuing an emergency water intertie with S&T in the district, recognizing the situation they're in with one well and no backup. And then in June 2023, as we had further discussions with S&T, the board conceptually approved a financial participation in the district's program Seawell project to complement the intertie. But through all these dialogues, and we know a lot of time has started to pass here, we recognized, or they recognized or identified other things that could help them out, resulting in the request that we received. The request is to enter into some sort of an agreement for emergency response support services from district staff. We've had kind of an informal agreement that if they needed something and we were available, we would come and help them out. But this is mainly to do with, they have two certified water operators. And a situation came up last summer where they were both going to be gone at the same time. And they asked if something came up, can we call you? So we informally said yes, and we did it on a time and materials type basis. So this would formalize that part of it. The other thing they'd like is maybe some routine maintenance. This thing that was specified in their request was to utilize our valve exercising machine and a staff person to work with their certified operator to go through their system. And the agreement would include full cost recovery for any assistance or work that would be provided. So basically, what I'm asking for is that you can conceptually approve this. I just didn't want to move forward with work if there was some disagreement on the board that we weren't interested in doing this. And that I'd bring it back, if we do conceptually approve that, I'll bring it back for a discussion and approval at a future date.
And this goes to UAC this month, or, I mean, do they gonna see, or when do we talk about that at UAC?
We can, since we didn't receive the request until after the last UAC,
Right,
I didn't want to slow this one down. So
I
we'll-
understand.
we'll-
Yeah, we're just
we'll-
introducing things
right,
now and
right.
we'll get to details there. Okay.
Any more questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll move to public comment. Is there any public comment in the audience? No public comment in the audience. Laura, is there anybody on?
If you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. There's no public comment online.
Okay, and then I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Okay, I'll move the board conceptually approve entering into an agreement with S&T Mutual Water Company to provide emergency water system response services and routine maintenance, and direct staff to bring back to the board a draft agreement for discussion and approval.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to see that this goes to UAC before it comes back to us, because I think I'd like to get their input on this.
Well, that will definitely happen this month.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we're going to take number 7, public comment for items not on the agenda. Anybody have any?
If you're online and you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. There's none online.
Okay, I'm going to take our break after 8A since fire's been here since the beginning of the meeting.
And we do have, I think, Sheriff at least online as well.
We have CHP online.
Oh, CHP, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll wait for those two and then we'll take a break.
All right. Well, as if you haven't heard from me enough tonight.
Can I have?
Just, first, I just want to thank you guys for going through that process. That's a big deal for your community. That's going to be a guiding document for the next 10 to 20 years, and it's going to shape what you got going on here in Los Osos. And your guys' commitment to doing that report and to doing the building assessment shows that your priority is to the fire department and that we're important to you guys. And so, speaking from my crew behind me, from the chief, thank you very much for supporting us and backing us. We really appreciate it. So moving into my report. So this year we worked on our continuing professional ed training. There's been a lot of that going on here in the last few months. And so basically we received training on vehicle stabilization, rope rescue, Diablo Canyon response, lithium ion battery fire response, which is becoming quite prevalent. And dealing with lithium ion batteries, most people think of cars, but there's also the micro mobility devices. There's vape pens, there's laptop computers, there's cell phones, there's battery banks, like what they want to build in Morro Bay. These things are showing up everywhere, and they pose a significant hazard and a significant issue. So San Luis Obispo County Fire, myself and a couple other folks are working on coming up with some standard operating guides that are going to be used throughout the county on how to deal with those incidents. And we're taking some cutting edge stuff. We're working with San Diego City Fire. We're taking some stuff from the FDNY, some stuff from LA City Fire Department, and we're kind of at the leading edge of that here in the county. So we look forward to growing that program. We also received some training on hazardous materials response and emergency medical response. And most of the stuff is just annual refresher training that we have to go through every year to keep our stuff. And that's a 3-day process that we have to go through. And reserve firefighters are all subject to that as well, to maintain their certificates. So you can kind of see where the ask is a little bit higher on them. We participated in multi-company training on, we focused on forcible entry. We did 3 days out at our drill tower with all the Battalion 1 stations, so Cambria, Cayucas, Los Osos, and we even brought in our headquarters station to work with us as well. But went out there and we practiced breaking down doors, and that way we can get in to get you if you need our help. We hosted a station tour for Christ Classical School. Really happy to see the communities coming back around, and we're kind of coming out of the COVID hangover, and we're starting to engage with the public and get the school programs going again. It's really, really important. And Winterfest still happened at Monarch Grove. It was just kind of an online thing, online indoor thing instead of the big production that it normally is. Didn't make it onto the report, but we were able to participate in that as well. Not really any significant incidents to speak of, but we were heavily impacted by the storm. A lot of trees down, a lot of power lines down, some minor flooding calls here and there. Most of the low-lying areas that are typically trouble areas for us were trouble areas again. We help monitor the retention basins with the district staff and make sure that all the emergency overflows and everything were still working, and that we didn't see any compromise in any of the walls of the reservoir. So everything seemed to be working quite well out there. And yeah, so that was it for the incidents. Something I want to try and do a little bit differently this year than we've done is I kind of want to give you like a small annual report. And this year it's going to be kind of simplified, and hopefully next year it'll be a little bit more, but I just want to kind of start something like that with you. And I just want to hit some highlights of the things that we accomplished this year. So obviously we had the City Gate Associates report for the standards of cover study that we completed. Omni Design, we did the assessment on the building, gave some great information and possible directions that we could go with that building. This year like I said earlier, we started the year with 17 personnel. We separated 10. We had one out on long-term injury. We had 2 out on long-term injury, and we separated 1. We still have 1 on long-term injury. And we hired 7 new candidates. Going down to the next line, this is going to talk about where our reserve firefighters are at and what those numbers look like. And those numbers represent a 13-month sampling size. So January to February this year. And so there was 856 available shifts for reserve firefighters, in which they covered 599 in order to meet that 4-person threshold. We contracted with FireCat this year to do our hose testing. We tested 8,410 feet of hose, which is a large ask. Typically we do that with our engine company, but we have to kind of go out of service to do that. And we do that stuff on the premise. This year we brought in FireCat. There's a company that I used in another jurisdiction that I worked in. They come in, they're third-party testers. We use third-party testers to test our self-contained breathing apparatus. We use them to test our ladders. We use them to test our pumps. So now we're going to use them to test our hose. And it was a very successful event. What they do is they come out, they have a large crew. And what we're able to do is keep our engines in service. We're able to keep our personnel in service. We're able to prevent injury to our personnel from taking all that hose off and putting it all on. But essentially what happens is they pull up with one of the reserve apparatus. They pull all the hose off. They test all the hose. They put it all back on the engine. And then we bring the frontline apparatus. We switch over, get in the reserve apparatus. We drive away. They test the frontline apparatus. And so it keeps us in service. It allows us to go do inspections, allows us to go do pub ed events, allows us to train, allows us to run our calls uninterrupted, and it keeps our personnel from getting injured. And with the third party, they have their own system that tracks all the hose. And so next year when we go around, it's going to be a lot easier. Next year, we're going into our ISO rating cycle where we're going to have to fill out the applications. And that's some of the information they ask for us is our hose testing information. And we'll be able to provide that to them a lot easier in a much more legible fashion. Last year, we conducted 29 public education events. I'd like to see that come up this year. We completed 1,147 hours of in-service training. So the company is tasked with completing a minimum of 1 hour of training a day. So that should be a 365 hour number. However, they far exceeded my expectations, and 1,147 hours, they're ensuring that they're giving you guys the service that you're paying for. And we had a total of 1,434 calls for service last year. So that go into the statistical report. So for the month of February, month of February, we were looking at, let's see, I got the wrong, nope. We had 144 incidents total, or 134 incidents total, excuse me. No fires, other than a couple of other fires, which have been dumpster fires and things like that. A couple vehicle accidents, one rescue, 84 medical aids. One of them was a CPR. We had 17 hazard calls, 26 public assists. There's going to be a spike in those numbers probably because of all the trees down and power lines down, that type of stuff. So going to the aid page. And so obviously this question came up earlier with the aid and how the statistics are produced. So this is produced out of our CAD system. So when the 911 call comes in and it gets generated in there, how that information is populated and all the information that we typically give you is generated out of that. The information that Citygate extrapolates is all out of what they call the infers. We call it the CalFIRS system, which is our incident reporting system, which is after the call is concluded and the engine company goes back to the station, the engine officer then inputs. So depending on if he clicks the right box or not, or if he has a full understanding of what the different little jurisdictional lines mean, that could change what those numbers actually mean. So looking at this, we were pretty even with aid given and aid received, going in and out to the county area mostly. And so those numbers are looking pretty even. What I am doing is I've been meeting with the statistician to figure out how we can give you guys different statistics on those outlying areas, the Montana de Oros, the 9I areas, and the district proper. So we're working on that. It's a little more difficult than I initially thought it was going to be to get that information because we have to change some boundary lines in the map, and that takes a little bit of time. So hopefully sometime mid-year, we'll get that worked out and we can start producing better information for you.
Do you think it would be worth maybe doing the aid given, aid received, that page, but do it for like the last 12 months and then put it in that report just to have that piece in there?
You want it for 12 months?
I'm just thinking that like you were saying, we're going to be, that standard of cover is going to go off into the future.
Yep.
And in 5 years, somebody might forget that it was different than that.
Yeah. It's absolutely something we can add. So
Yeah, because I think since we have it broken out, that might not be so hard
Yep.
to do, right?
Yep. Yeah, we definitely can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be a good sheet to add into that report, basically.
Yep. Yeah, we can do that. That's it for the monthly report. The other report that I gave you is the workload report for 2023. So in 2023, we were looking at 15 structure fires, 4 vegetation fires, 14 vehicle fires, 6 other fires, 1,804 medical aids. 33 of them were CPR, 22 of them were law enforcement assist, 78 vehicle accidents, 36 rescues. We had 102 other type of calls, 342 public assist calls, and 153 hazardous calls. This was the 3rd busiest station in the county fire system. So Pismo, Napalmo was the busiest station. Pismo Beach was the 2nd busiest, and South Bay was the 3rd busiest in the county fire system.
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is?
Yeah. I mean, should we
You
be?
take again.
Yep.
Okay.
It would be it'd be your demographic. Yep. And it could have to do with the approximately 1.4 million people coming through the area to
Yeah,
go visit a park.
Pismo, I mean, tours.
So,
It's the 1804
Yeah.
medical assist.
so anyway, that's the end of my report. Any questions?
No, does any public have any questions? Cause we're gonna take a break after. Anybody here? Nobody? Laura, does anybody have a comment online?
If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. No public comment.
Marshall, if we could do the CHP report.
what we're gonna
I'm
do.
Sorry.
Laura already said that. You weren't paying attention.
thought
I
you
was
were
a little
taking
curious. Can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Like, and thanks for jumping in and, explaining to us the difference, because his report didn't seem like what you've been telling us, so I appreciate that. All right, I'm a little curious about the, training for, lithium ion battery fires. Like,
Yeah.
what does that entail?
So right now, what it entails is awareness, making sure that everybody's aware of the dangers associated with it, the gases that they offset that we may mistaken for just smoke, but it's actually gases that can be quite hazardous to our health and some agencies have some folks that are probably not going to recover from the injuries that they've gotten from them. They're also very explosive when they've been damaged, and understanding how to deal with that and how to contain those incidents. So what we're working on right now is we're working on some dispatch procedures and some call interrogation tactics that our dispatchers can do to kind of get some of that information for us. We're looking at some different call types that change the response plans a little bit, that also include battalion chief response and include hazmat response, or at least consultation, a notification to the hazmat captain so that he can make a phone call to whoever's on the call and have a discussion. It ranges from a mobility device all the way up to a tractor trailer response. And so we're looking at all these different things. And so right now what we're working on is we're building some guide cards for our responders to understand, what they have in front of them and what the appropriate actions are. Some of the challenges that we've seen out there with, we'll say, lithium-ion cars or vehicles is when they do catch on fire, the traditional methods of dealing with that fire aren't necessarily the way to go. And so depending on whether or not that battery pack has been impacted, it may be just a car fire where just the car itself is burning, or it might be the battery pack is burning. In the case that there's a runaway chemical reaction going on in the batteries, our response and how we deal with that may change significantly. And we may have to go with what they call a let it burn policy, where we just allow the car to do its thing, and we're dealing with an incident that may take an hour versus 4 to 5 hours. My one incident that I've had with a lithium-ion car, we had a small fire in the battery pack that was roughly the size of a softball. It took us over 15,000 gallons of water to deal with that issue and several hours, and we destroyed that car just trying to get to that battery pack. So there's the technology in firefighting hasn't necessarily caught up yet to the demand of what's going on out there, and there's a lot of problems that firefighters are encountering with these vehicles. So giving our folks the tools they need and to understand what to do with them and who to call and what to do. Just today we tested we were getting a demonstration of a product that essentially is it's kind of like a portable water jet for cutting metal. And essentially what it does is it puts an abrasive into a water jet, and you're able to cut with it. And that so far has been the only thing that's been really effective on these vehicles, is actually cutting out the portion of the battery that's affected and removing that. And that's how they're getting the chemical reaction, or the runaway thermal reaction to stop, is just removing that piece.
That's interesting.
So
It's
they're
kind of scary too.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on out there. There's a chief officer out of San Diego that's kind of leading the charge on things. One of our hazmat captains sits on fire scope. He's the chair of the committee that's dealing with some of this stuff. And so we have kind of a direct link of information that's coming into us, and we're hoping to leverage that and have a better understanding of what's going on, and make sure that we're responding safely and keeping you guys safe.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. So with that, we'll just do the sheriff's report and then, pardon me, CHP report, and then we'll take a short break.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Struggling with some technical difficulties for whatever reason the last couple of nights with my computer. So anyway.
You're very loud. You're very loud. You're fine. We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me again tonight. I appreciate it a lot. For the CHP for the month of February in and around Los Osos, we had 5 total collisions. 2 of those were actually 4 of those were non-injury collisions. And 2 of those 4 were I'm sorry, 3 of those. Okay, let me back up. Good grief. So we had a total of 5.
We'll erase that part and we'll start from here. Okay.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I should probably have my glasses on, but so we had a total of 5 collisions. 2 of those were non-injury collisions. 2 of those were non-injury hit and run collisions, and one of them was a minor injury hit and run collision. So a total of 5, and then we made 1 DUI arrest that did not involve a collision as well for Los Osos for February. So that being said, short and sweet, and I am available for questions.
Okay, does the board have any questions? Any public comment in the audience? Seeing none, Laura, do you have any hands raised?
Nope, there's none online.
Okay, Thank you very much. And with that, we'll take a short 7-minute break.
Oh, did we have CHP on or was that? Okay.
Thank you. Yep, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. I'm like, was that?
All right. Let's go. So the first item on our agenda, to continue on the agenda, is item 8D, the the utility department report.
We've been doing that written only, but there's a couple of things I'd like to highlight, mainly in our CIP program. We've completed a couple of projects, 16th Street North Tank, the transmission main for Program C. And we're working on the well equipping phase. And finally, starting Monday, we're doing complete rehabilitation of South Bay Lower Well. We're losing capacity and production out of that well. So we're really excited that Cleeth Harris and F&T Drilling just jumped on it, and we'll start work Monday and have it done by the end of the month.
This Monday?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I can answer any other questions that was in the utilities report.
Right on 16th Street. We're
Yeah,
done. Good.
it's been great.
Good.
There's just a little bit of wrap up. They have to dispose of the sandblasted paint, but they're waiting for the lab test results on it. There's no other questions. I could move on to my general manager's report.
Okay.
Just real quick on these, we're headstrong into our 2024-25 budget. It's always been so hard to say that we're already thinking out that far. We did have a run through with the Utilities Advisory Committee on Capital Project Plan, which was a really good discussion. Kind of a big one is solid waste rate setting manual update. The district and city of San Luis Obispo are spearheading that effort. We have a consultant on board, and we are hoping to get the final product out. It'll probably be in the summer, but we can expect probably a base year rate application for Mission Country Disposal by the end of this month, is my understanding. So we're going to miss the update of the rate setting manual and we'll be operating under the old one, but I'll explain all that to you when we start getting into that discussion. Just a quick update on Title 19, which is the water offset ordinance, county's water offset ordinance. They did adopt it. Board of Supervisors did adopt the amended Title 19 last Tuesday with some recommendations for changes from the three water purveyors from Los Osos. That was a great effort, and do appreciate Richard Marginson's comments at that meeting supporting us. Finally, the recycled water connection to schools. It looks like we will get a connection to the Los Osos Middle School this summer. Been working out a few final details on that. Baywood Elementary is going to be the next in line, but it looks like there's a possibility they may rebuild that school because of the way it was initially constructed. It's old, and so
It's all open floor plan.
yeah, that's what they're
It was built
saying.
in the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. And so everyone's complaining about it. So they may just rebuild the school on the playground area and convert where the buildings were into playground.
Oh,
So anyway,
wow.
that's still in the works. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Yes, regarding the county's Title 19 update, how many of our comments did they take into response or into?
They did well on most of them. The one they didn't respond to was the population in multifamily and mobile homes. They're using the single family number. We made that comment that it was overstating, which the ripple effect of that is if an applicant goes in and retrofits in those homes, they'll get a higher credit than they probably will actually get in water
Okay.
savings. But otherwise, they were very good about
Okay,
addressing
good. Thank
comments.
you.
Thanks for writing that letter and
Yep, getting
Yeah.
it in and
It was a rush to the end.
yeah, it was.
sure. Okay, to Chamber of Commerce, nothing, I assume. LoCac, nothing, I assume. Oh, you did?
Microphone, please.
I apologize. I forgot
Wanted
to
to-
email out Matthew's report.
That's okay. I sent it in late as usual. The one thing there there's two things. The one first thing was about the HCP, and Ron, you probably know some about that, but basically the county staff talked about how the HCP got approved in February, but it was going to be a fairly long road to implementation. That they were going to, I believe, planning and building staff were going to come back to the Board of Supervisors for a recommendation on a path forward. And then they're looking at how they would fund it, because they need to essentially purchase property to make the mitigations. Is that pretty close?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And the impact to us could be fairly significant because if we do a pipeline project, for instance, even if it's in the roadway, we have to pay $1.25 per square foot as a mitigation into the HCP. So let's say you have a 3,000-foot pipeline like we just put in down Mountain View. I'm not sure what the square footage would be, but it'd be a significant amount of money.
For a pipeline in a roadway,
Any disturbed soil is what's in
how
the
about
HCP.
disturbing asphalt?
It's disturbing. I mean, if you're gonna repave over asphalt, you're not disturbing the soil, but if you're trenching, you're disturbing soil.
That was certainly the vibe that I got on it, was that they were looking for any which way to be able to fund the thing, because
With
essentially-
all of the open space that's been dedicated around here, they're still
Mhm.
looking for more.
So we're gonna be doing a lot of horizontal directional drilling.
Makes sense. But anyways, that was the main topic of discussion. The secondary was Sunnyside School and a possible sale. Supervisor Gibson didn't really comment about it. And then it got pulled from the agenda. It was supposed to be, I think, on the 27th at the Board of Supervisors, but it got pulled. So we'll see what happens. There's a lot of community support, obviously, for Sunnyside. The schools that are in the buildings were there, and they were really supportive of working together as a community to try to get that land.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, Utility Advisory Committee?
One takeaway from the meeting that we had, we went over the capital improvement plan, as Ron mentioned, and there was some sense of urgency on the committee to maybe even move ahead with projects, even if it meant spending reserves at this point. We kind of want to accomplish things, and that was just kind of a general takeaway. Otherwise, we just received all of our updates. One thing that I do, it's kind of somewhat related, that it also comes in under M, announcements at other meetings that I've been to. I also went to that meeting on the 27th for the Title 19 updates at the Board of Soups. And I just went to observe. I wasn't going to say anything. Didn't really need to, because our general manager worked with county staff when it came time for amendments. They were ready, printed there for the audience to see. None of this, can we work it out on site? It was a nice thing to see. And so good job to just make that smooth. It was like, okay, we were expecting this and staff is ready. Here we go. Some people thought that maybe they'd wasted their time going to the meeting because it just was such a non-event, but it was good. Thank you.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay, finance. KC, you
Um,
had your
so,
drawing presentation.
oh, yes, we did. I didn't know if I should report that since everybody's getting it, but yes, fine job presenting. And they did recommend, the committee recommended we receive and file the financials and approve the warrant register, and it was, yeah, good meeting.
Okay, ESAC is occurring on the 14th. I'm sorry, I said the 13th, my error. Basin Management Committee, next meeting is on the 20th. Director's announcement of district and community interest and reports at attendance of
I have a
public meetings.
couple.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Chris.
And I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting. I had a business thing down in Newport Beach and couldn't quite make it back in time. But Ron and I went to the CSD annual meeting, and they had a few presenters. I think they had someone from PG&E, and that was kind of a rough room for him. And somebody from the state CSDA was
Mhm.
speaking, and one of the things she wanted to point out is like, if we're on business, there's good rental car rates for us.
Enterprise.
With enterprise rental car, but even if we're not on business, just because we're part of a CSD entity, we can also get good rates. So that was what she wanted to tell everyone. And I also attended the Special District Leadership Academy. It was in San Luis, so that was nice. And the part I liked the most was, questions to ask your auditors, or that's what I found the most relevant to me. That was the last session, and I got a couple of nice booklets, special district reserve guidelines, introduction to revenues. I grabbed an extra. I meant to bring them to FAC to see if anyone wanted them for reference. But I think what I learned is that when they talked about the questions, you should ask your auditors. Like, I knew a lot of the answers, so we're doing a good job. Like there weren't holes in it. So but I found it worthwhile. And
It was nice. Laura found a scholarship to pay for that for Chris too. So.
And we get some sort of discount on our insurance because I attended, so that's good too. And our attorney was also there.
Okay, any previously asked questions? No.
None.
All right, public comment for items on the administrative committee reports and the consent agenda. Before we get there though, does anybody want to pull an item? Seeing none. Okay, so it's for the administrative committee reports and the entire consent agenda.
There's none online.
Well, I've got one in person.
Richard Margetson. The meeting at the Board of Soups was very smooth. I'm not sure our supervisor completely understood the impact of the amendments. I'm just stunned at the county's lack of, it's not just this, it seems like every major report that comes out from the county dealing with this community, when errors are pointed out, they just have no interest in correcting them until they're basically shoved down their throat at a later time. The mobile home and multifamily thing still bothers the hell out of me because it's more than 10% of our households are mobile homes, and they're going to be ripe for, anyway. The other thing I wanted to, related to the presentation, but dealing with the financials, is the current special fire tax brings in $673,000 a year. When you break it down per on average, most households are single family households, it's costing a single family household 30 cents a day. And that initial special fire tax was to improve our level of service and set up a reserve fund for purchasing vehicles. I don't know what the new number is going to be, but 30 cents a day per single family household on average is bringing us 673,000. So just keep that in mind as we're moving down. I think it's going to be a talking point we can use. There's numerous talking points we can use. There hasn't been a need for an increase in the fire tax, a proposition to the community in 18 years. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any public comment for items on anybody online, Laura?
Nope, there's no one online.
Okay, so we'll have the consent agenda motion.
I move that we receive and file the administrative and committee reports and approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
You're getting much better at this, Matthew.
It takes me a minute to.
Okay, do we need a roll call or is it just?
Yes, we do.
Okay, well, Laura, then it's in your court.
All right, Director Forcroy,
Yes.
Vice President Womack,
Yes.
Director Sisenya,
Yes.
President Ohilsky.
Yes. Okay, so we have no pulled consent items. Any future agenda items anybody like to bring up? Okay, seeing none. Any closing board comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
Thanks, everybody.